Imagine being constantly pressured to be the best, feeling like your entire life is being defined by the expectations of a family that never seems satisfied, until, in a moment of despair, you find yourself faced with a choice that could change everything. Lena, a young surgeon, has just faced one of the biggest disappointments of her life, failure at a crucial moment. But when she least expects it, a simple phrase spoken by a nurse she never imagined would respect her could be the key to the radical transformation she's been searching for. What happens when the world tells you you've failed, but someone you least expect sees something great in you? You'll want to know what happens next. When we're young, we often hear phrases from our parents like, "You can be anything," "Believe in your dreams," and "The sky's the limit." But for some people, these words carry a different weight. They don't mean freedom, but pressure. Pressure to achieve an ideal that is constantly placed on them, without them being able to breathe, without them being able to fail. This is the case of Lena, our protagonist, a young woman who grew up in an environment where excellence was not only expected, it was demanded. From a very young age, Lena knew she had no right to make mistakes. Her family, made up of highly successful people, always looked to her with uncompromising expectations. Her father, a renowned businessman, never accepted anything less than perfection. Her mother, a woman of great social standing, always insisted that Lena be not only good, but the better in everything she did. If she got an A in school, the silence at home spoke louder than anything else. Her parents never let her forget that the only acceptable place was the topo. And Lena wanted to be recognized. She wanted her parents to be proud of her. But the reality was that she lived to live up to everyone's expectations except her own. The truth is, she had no choice. It was as if her entire worth was tied to academic success, winning awards, and the number of hours she spent studying to become a top professional. If she were a renowned surgeon, then she would have proven to everyone, and especially her parents, that she was worthy of your love and approval. But what happens when, in the midst of all this pressure, you fail to deliver? When failures are seen not as learning opportunities, but as failures that will tarnish your reputation and dethrone your chances of being something great. And what happens when that weight becomes unbearable and you start to question whether all this effort is worth it? This was Lena's life. When she entered medical school, she knew she was on a tough path, but she felt prepared for it. After years of studying, she thought, "I know I can do this. I can do it." But the educational system was unforgiving, and the weight of her family's expectations seemed to weigh heavily on her shoulders. When she made mistakes, when her hands shook during early surgeries, or when her choices were questioned, her parents' words echoed in her mind. "You can't fail, Lena. Never fail." Soon she realized that, more than the desire to be a good doctor, the real motivation behind her effort would attest to her family that she deserved to be where she was, that she was good enough to be among the best. Their approval would be the only way to finally feel like she had earned your place. Lena felt like she was in a constant race, always trying to reach a finish line that seemed to get further away as she approached. But the truth is, no matter how much Lena dedicated herself, she would never be good enough for her parents. No matter how many awards she won, how many overtime hours she worked at the hospital, or how well she performed her tasks, they always wanted more. "Why don't you do more surgery hours? Why can't you be like Dr. James?" These questions always cut Lena like sharp blades. Comparisons with other colleagues were constant. She began to feel that, no matter how hard she tried, she would never be able to fill the gap in their expectations. This pressure, though disguised as love and care, began to erode Lena's confidence. Instead of feeling fulfilled, she found herself consumed by anxiety and fear. Not be enough. She woke every morning with a weight on her chest, knowing that the day-to-day journey would be marked by challenges that, if not met, would mean silent disapproval from her parents. Their smiles were no longer sincere. They seemed more like an implicit demand for success. And Lena knew it. Little by little, she began to internalize this fear of failure, the fear that your whole life could be considered a failure in the eyes of others. She reached the point of questioning whether she had chosen the right profession or whether she was simply trying to be someone she wasn't, someone to fit into the frames created by others. But what happens when it all starts to fall apart? What happens when you start to feel like you no longer have the strength to keep chasing approval that will never come? When, suddenly, the pressure becomes an unbearable weight, and you can no longer look in the mirror without feeling like you've failed, that you're far from ideal. And it's then, at that very moment, that Lena's life takes a turn she never imagined. So, did you identify with Lena's story? How many times have you felt like you weren't doing enough, that other people's expectations were putting too much pressure on you? If you liked this story opening, like the video, and subscribe to the channel to follow the rest of Lena's journey. Let's see together how she will deal with these challenges and what she will encounter on the path to self-improvement. Stay tuned, because Lena's story is just beginning. The clock struck dawn as Lena, exhausted and with sweaty hands, reviewed the day's notes. The cold light of the operating room reflected on her face, highlighting the lines of fatigue and the tension she was trying to hide. She had completed another surgery, one of the most challenging of her career, but the outcome wasn't what she'd hoped. The patient, a child with a rare condition, succumbed, and Lena was responsible for the failure. The words of his parents, who always demanded excellence from him, echoed in his mind. "You have to be the best, Lena. You can't make mistakes. Making mistakes isn't an option." These words were etched in her memory from childhood, when she began to realize that her life would not be like others. It was not enough to just be good. She had to be perfect. In the middle of that silent night, Lena knew she had failed. Guilt consumed her mind. It was as if the weight of the world was on her shoulders, and each medical error was another layer of invisible but heavy armor that she couldn't remove. She thought about the expectations her parents had for her, how they expected her to be the greatest surgeon in the country. They had always believed she would be the better, that her journey would be marked by immaculate victories. But now, here she was, facing the reality of failure, and the idea that her own failures might be irreparable loomed large. Every time a mistake was made, she felt her parents' disapproving gaze. When she was still a child, they never let her forget how much success was important. They saw her as an extension of their own ambitions, and the weight of their expectations was ever present. Lena knew her parents, even without saying anything directly, looked at her with disappointment. Their silence after the failed surgery was heavier than any verbal criticism. They were disappointed. Lena, with her dedication, her sweat, and her sleepless nights, had failed to live up to their expectations. She wasn't the best, not even close. That night, Lena felt a deep pain, not only because of the patient's death, but also because she knew she had lost the trust of her own family. Every mistake seemed to affect not only her career, but also how she was perceived. At home, she felt like a failed, as if she had failed at everything she could have done. Messages of support from classmates and teachers did not comfort her. After all, no words of comfort could cure the inner frustration she was feeling. She knew deep down that she was a good doctor. She had given her all to learning, studying, and growing. But when a mistake happens, it becomes a shadow that overshadows all past achievements. Lena's long-held confidence in her abilities was crumbling. The fear of making another mistake paralyzed her, and her self-esteem, once solid, now felt as fragile as glass. His parents, who had always been his biggest supporters, were now filled with doubts. They never expressed it directly, but their looks and conversations with friends and family, full of, "What if Lena had pursued another career?" were enough to make Lena question her choices. Maybe she was really inadequate for the profession. Maybe she didn't have what it took to be the successful doctor everyone expected. Maybe she was just looking for an impossible dream, something that always seemed to be within her reach, but that, deep down, she would never be able to achieve. Conversations with her parents, always full of praise and encouragement, were now surrounded by questions about when she would sign up for the profession. They no longer knew what to expect from her. They wanted to see tangible results, and Lena could no longer produce those results. She was trapped in a cycle of self-doubt, where her failures seemed to multiply with each passing day. The messages of, "Stay strong, Lena. You'll get through this. You're stronger than you think," although well-intentioned, could not erase the perception of failure that was taking over her mind. Lena no longer saw herself as the confident woman she once was. She felt a great lacuna between the talented doctor she dreamed of being and the woman who, at that moment, felt that everything around her was falling apart. For the next week, Lena withdrew from her friends and colleagues. She preferred to be alone, reviewing her mistakes, trying to find a reason for what happened. Try as she might, the explanations eluded her. Techniques and justifications didn't help her feel better. The question that echoed in her mind was, will I ever be good enough? What hurt most, however, wasn't the pain of being criticized by others. It was the loneliness. Lena felt alone in her struggle, unsure if anyone truly understood how much she was sinking. The feeling of failure was more devastating than any negative comment. When you see yourself failing at something so important, you start to doubt yourself. Doubt spread throughout Lena's body, paralyzing her movements and her vision of the future. The worst part was realizing she was losing time. Each lost day, unsure of how to handle failure, became a sentence of procrastination. She didn't know whether to abandon her profession and pursue a new path or keep trying, even though she wasn't sure if her confidence would ever return. In the midst of this dilemma, Lena found herself at a crossroads. It was the most crucial moment of her career, and she didn't know how to move forward. But what she didn't know was that fate was about to present her with something that would change everything, something that would make her rethink everything she believed about herself and what it truly means to be a successful doctor. Have you ever felt like this? Like the world is pressing down on you and you don't know what to do? Did you identify with Lena's journey? If so, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next chapters of this story. Her journey is about to take a major turn, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Lena felt as if she were drowning in a sea of self-doubt. The days seemed to pass in a haze, a mixture of frustration and mental exhaustion. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who had lost the trust not only of her family but also of herself. She no longer knew if she was doing what she loved, or if she was just trying to please everyone around her. Her parents, with their unrealistic expectations, were so distant from her now. But deep down, Lena knew she couldn't go on like this. She knew I needed to make a decision, or else everything she had achieved up until then could be in vain. At the end of that difficult week, Lena did something she hadn't considered until then. She gave herself a break. It was time to stop chasing approval and take a step back to reevaluate what really mattered for her. On a cold Saturday morning, she picked up a notebook and began writing. It wasn't a list of tasks or goals to please her parents or family, but a list of reasons why she wanted to continue in medicine, even when all seemed lost. In that moment of reflection, Lena realized something profound. She hadn't failed because she was inadequate. She had failed because she tried to please others instead of herself. Medicine, for her, wasn't just a profession. It was a passion. She didn't choose to be a surgeon to be admired or to fill a void of expectations. She chose medicine because, since she was little, the desire to heal and of help others to live a healthier, fuller life has always been with her. Lena remembered her early days in college, when she felt that ardor of purpose in his heart. That passion for saving lives and making a difference could not be lost. And it was at that moment that the decision to not give up was made. Lena knew the path would be difficult, but she also knew that if she didn't keep fighting for what she loved, the weight of guilt and frustration would consume her completely. She would no longer be a frustrated doctor, waiting for the approval of others. She would reinvent. I would invest even more in my personal and professional development, without letting the mistakes of the past define their future. Over the next few days, Lena began searching for ways to improve. She knew surgery was her specialty, but she also knew she needed to delve deeper into new knowledge and skills that could make her the doctor she dreamed of being, but without external pressure. He began taking online advanced surgery courses, reading books on innovative treatment techniques, and practicing in simulated labs where he could challenge himself without the risk of harming patients. No more goals imposed by others. Now she had a new goal: be the best version of herself, without haste. But it wasn't just the technical side that Lena wanted to improve on. She knew that self-confidence, it was a skill that needed to be redeveloped. For months, she had let insecurity take over her thinking. She felt like when she made a mistake, the world collapsed around her. Her parents' criticism became a shadow that hung over every decision. So Lena began working on mentality. He underwent therapy, began practicing meditation, and gradually learned to recognize your victories, even if small. Over time, she realized that trust didn't just come from others, but from within herself. Every step toward overcoming self-criticism was a victory for her mental health, and it also helped her grow as a professional. But the biggest challenge of all was yet to come. Lena knew her career in medicine would never be easy, but now she was better prepared to face obstacles with a fresh perspective. Instead of seeing failure as something that defined her, she learned to see it as an opportunity for growth. When you fall, the only choice is to get up and move forward, and that's what Lena decided to do. She was willing to start over. Zero, with the courage of those who have nothing left to lose, but the certainty that the best was yet to come. That decision was the key to Lena starting to believe back to her potential. She remembered her first day of college, when her eyes shone with excitement at being there. It was no longer about others' expectations. It was about her, and the mission she had chosen for her life. The feeling of being on the right path once again took hold of her soul. The fear of failure was still there, but now it was just Abalsado help her cross the river of doubt. Lena knew that by the end of her journey, she would become not only a great surgeon, but a woman strong and resilient. Now, with more confidence and commitment, she prepared for her next big challenge. Her next surgery would be crucial, and Lena knew that success or failure there would not define who she was, but how she dealt with the ups and downs of life. What mattered now was the vision of the future, and Lena was determined to take control of her career without any more excuses or fears. That was the real turning point. Lena was rebuilding your trajectory, not just as a surgeon, but as a person. She would no longer be defined by her mistakes or the fear of criticism from others. Her future was in her hands, and that future would be marked by courage, constant learning, and, above all, the pursuit of excellence that came from within. Do you identify with Lena's decision? How many times have you thought about giving up, but something inside you made you keep going? If this story touched your heart, like the video and subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapter of this journey. Lena's life is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Lena spent her days between books, simulations, and studies. When she wasn't at the hospital, where she did her day job, she was at home, immersed in videos, articles, and challenging case studies. She had decided not to wait for opportunities, but create your own opportunities. Her focus was sharper than ever, and her mindset had completely changed. She no longer feared failure. Instead, she saw herself as someone who needed seize every opportunity for growth. She knew the road would be long, but she felt something big was about to happen. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, while the hospital was particularly busy, that fate unexpectedly knocked on Lena's door. She was reviewing medical records when the call for an emergency procedure rang out. It was no ordinary surgery. It was a complex and extremely risky case. A young patient with a rare and critical condition that required urgent surgical intervention. The type of surgery few professionals her age would feel comfortable performing, especially given its complexity. Lena knew it would be difficult, perhaps even impossible. But when she looked at the patient's condition and realized that there was no other option, she felt a spark of courage ignite within her. This could be her moment, her chance to prove to herself and everyone around her how much she had evolved. This was the kind of challenge she had been training to face, even though no one knew about it. When the team leader approached her, Lena had already made her decision. With a serious expression and a deep voice, he explained that the surgery would be performed in the main operating room, with a team of experienced professionals at her side. However, he mentioned something that stopped Lena's heart for a moment. He wanted her to be in charge of the operation, given that the patient had a connection to her area of expertise. What followed was an exchange of tense glances. Lena knew this moment represented more than just surgery. It was trial by fire that would define his future in medicine. The operating room was cold and silent, except for the sound of the monitors monitoring the patient's vital signs. Lena felt the pressure of the entire world on her shoulders, but something inside told her to trust. She mentally prepared herself, remembering everything she had studied, all the sleepless nights, the hours spent in simulations, every mistake she had made in the past, but which now gave her the courage not to make the same mistake again. This was her chance to show that she was no longer a woman who feared criticism or failure, but rather a prepared, capable, and above all, confident professional. The other team members watched as Lena prepared all the instruments, adjusted the settings, and guided the team. She was leading the operation, but what she felt at that moment wasn't fear, but a sense of control that she had never imagined she could have. Lena took a deep breath, and in a clear, firm voice, began giving instructions. Her hands, previously trembling and filled with uncertainty, were now steady and agile. As the surgery progressed, Lena noticed her hands no longer trembled. Her focus was on every movement, every decision she made, every step that brought her closer to success. The tension was palpable, but Lena didn't let it shake her. Each second felt like an eternity, but she knew what she was doing. The hours passed quickly as she performed the delicate procedures with extreme precision. The most critical moment came when Lena had to make a delicate incision to release pressure in the patient's airway, a maneuver that required impeccable skill. She remembered all the training, the simulations, and it was at that moment that she realized how worthwhile every minute of study and every sacrifice had been. The team was silent, watching the surgery, but their eyes were no longer suspicious. They saw Lena as a leader, someone who took charge of the situation calmly and wisely. Lena felt that by controlling the operating room, she was also controlling her own destiny, and this gave her renewed confidence. She was no longer a young surgeon seeking approval, but a professional, aware of their abilities and willing to face any challenge that arises. When the surgery was successfully completed, Lena didn't feel a burst of joy. Instead, it was a feeling of quiet satisfaction, a deep sense of accomplishment. The weight she had carried for so long, the self-doubt, the pressure from her family, the fear of failure, began to lift. She had proven to herself who was capable of dealing with the greatest challenges, and this no longer depended on external validation, but on his own confidence. As the patient was transferred to the recovery room, Lena looked at the team with a small smile. It was a silent victory, but for her, it had a much deeper meaning. Lena knew that the respect she had earned in that operating room wasn't just about the success of that operation. It was respect earned for herself, for the journey of self-improvement she had undertaken. The team leader, who had initially been reticent, approached Lena and with a sincere smile said, "Great job, Lena. You made a difference today." It was the recognition she so desperately needed, but more than that, it was confirmation that she was on the right path. But most importantly, Lena now knew that the recognition that mattered most lay in her own awareness and the skills she had honed over time. But as night fell, and the operation became a distant memory, Lena knew this wasn't the end of her journey. She knew there was much more to come. The surgery she had undergone was just a taste of what she could achieve. The real challenge now was to keep moving forward, not to please others, but to overcome your own limits. She was ready for the next step. And unbeknownst to her, this surgery would mark a turning point in her career. Have you ever had the chance to prove your ability when everything seemed lost? Lena's story is just beginning, and she faces many more challenges. If you're inspired and want to, follow the rest of Lena's journey, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. The next phase of her journey is about to begin, and you won't want to miss it. The sound of the heart monitor filled the heavy air of the operating room, echoing as a constant reminder that time was not on her side at that moment. Lena knew she was about to perform an operation that could be the most important of her career to date. Every move, every decision, could make all the difference. The procedure before her was not something most young surgeons would risk, and the weight of this responsibility almost made her hesitate for a second. But before doubts took hold of her heart, she remembered what she had learned. She had prepared for this moment, and now it was time to prove to herself how much she had evolved. The patient, a 32-year-old woman, was in critical condition. Her rare condition required immediate and extremely complex intervention, which Lena knew would test her technical skills and emotional strength. The team stood by her side, ready, but the looks of respect and concern were inevitable. The team leader, an experienced surgeon, watched her attentively, but also with confidence. Lena knew that look wasn't just an expectation of success, but a silent way of reassuring her. With the scalpel blade, she made the first incision. The tension was palpable. Sweat dripped down Lena's face, but her movements were firm and determined. The surgery was highly complex, and she soon faced one of the first difficulties. The tumor was located deeper than expected, requiring even greater precision. Fear, like a silent shadow, tried to infiltrate her mind. What if she messed up? What if this was the mistake that would mark her forever? But Lena refused to give in to these doubts. I was no longer the insecure young woman who had begun her career, full of fears and uncertainties. She was a capable surgeon, and was there to give his best no matter what happened. As the operation progressed, Lena began to feel confidence grow within you. Each precise cut, each calculated movement, made her feel more confident in her abilities. The sound of the scalpel cutting into the patient's skin mingled with the sound of the machines monitoring her condition. Lena concentrated, blocking out negative thoughts, and completely immersed herself in what she was doing. She knew that the success of this surgery would come not only from her technique, but also from her ability to remain calm under pressure. It was then that, during a delicate maneuver to remove part of the tumor, the unexpected happened. The tissue around the area where she was operating began to bleed more than expected. Panic threatened to set in, but Lena forced herself to stand firm. The team leader's words echoed in her mind. When the going gets tough, you have to trust your instinct. Those words were a reminder of everything she had learned so far. Lena adjusted her technique, used caution, and focused on the steady flow of her breath, controlling the anxiety that threatened to take over. As time passed, the surgery became more challenging, but Lena felt a growing sense of control. The fear had been replaced by solid confidence. She had trained for this moment for years, and now she knew that her studies, mistakes, and successes had prepared her for something like this. Every sure step she took, every precise movement she made with her hands, brought her closer to her goal, saving the patient's life. The tension in the operating room was palpable, but Lena knew she couldn't let it get to her. The team, once cautious, was now more confident. She was leading the way, and as the procedure progressed, Lena realized she was becoming the surgeon she always wanted to be, the one who not only knew what to do, but also knew how to remain calm when everything around her seemed to be falling apart. The eyes of her colleagues, once filled with doubt, now watched her with respect. They saw the control, the confidence she was exuding, and the ability to face the unknown accurately. When it finally came time to close the incision, Lena felt the relief that the most difficult part of the surgery was over. She wiped her forehead with the sleeve of her lab coat, feeling a deep sense of exhaustion, but also an indescribable sense of conquest. What had once seemed like an insurmountable challenge now felt like a personal victory. She had overcome her own doubts, dealt with the pressure, and shown herself that she could do the impossible. The surgery was successful, but the real victory was within Lena. She knew she had won, not only for technical competence, but for the emotional strength she demonstrated in overcoming fear and insecurity. She was no longer the same young surgeon who began her journey. She had become a professional capable of dealing with any adversity, with the confidence of someone who has already gone through the greatest difficulties and come out stronger. As she left the operating room, Lena felt a wave of gratitude for herself. She knew that this day represented more than a successful operation. It was the day she proved to herself that she could, indeed, face the greatest challenges, no matter how difficult they were. Lena not only became a renowned surgeon, but someone who had learned to lead your own destiny, without depending on the expectations of others. Have you ever faced a moment where doubts almost stopped you? How did you deal with it? Lena's story is far from over. If you identified with this overcoming, enjoy the video and subscribe to the channel. Lena's journey continues, and together we'll see how far she can go. Don't miss the next steps on this journey of confidence and victory. After the surgery was over, Lena felt exhausted, but it wasn't the usual exhaustion of someone who just finished a difficult procedure. It was the exhaustion of someone who had finally reconquered himself. She had faced her greatest fears, exceeded her family's expectations, and now she was proving to others, and, most importantly to herself, that she had what it took to be a great surgeon. The operating room was quiet, as the team began cleaning and organizing the instruments. The patient's vital signs monitor still emitted a steady, calming sound. The pressure Lena had felt before and during the operation was slowly dissipating, but the weight of sterilization began to seep in. She felt that this was the moment when she finally stood out, not only for her technical competence, but for the way she had faced the challenge with calm, confidence, and skill. However, recognition for her work didn't just come from her superiors. What Lena didn't expect was what would happen immediately after the surgery, when she finally left the room, exhausted and with the weight of a smile on her face. As she walked through the hospital corridors, she began to notice the looks on her colleagues' faces. They were different, no longer the suspicious and skeptical ones of before. This time, there was genuine respect, and more than that, admiration. One of the doctors she respected, Dr. Vicente, who had previously been critical of her performance, approached her with a smile. "Lena, you were amazing today. Congratulations on the surgery. That was truly something." Those words, spoken simply but carrying a profound weight, struck Lena in a way she couldn't have anticipated. For years she had lived in the shadow of doubt about her ability, and now, here, she was receiving a validation that she never imagined would come from her own colleagues. It was as if an invisible barrier had been broken, and Lena realized that this approval was more than just professional praise. It was recognition of her true value as a surgeon. As the following days passed, the respect for Lena among her colleagues became more evident. She began to be included in more technical discussions, received invitations to participate in more complex procedures, and even mentored younger doctors. What had previously seemed like a lonely journey, where she constantly struggled to be heard and respected, now became a path of collaboration and growth. The climax came when, in a meeting with the entire surgical team, the head of the team, Dr. Almeida, decided to comment on Lena's successful surgery. "I want to congratulate Lena. She took the lead on one of the most challenging operations we've had to date, and the results speak for themselves. I'm impressed, Lena, and I believe everyone here can see your talent and competence." This moment was a turning point for Lena. For the first time, she wasn't just recognized as the young surgeon, or as someone with potential. Now, she was an equal among the best, someone with a recognized skill and, more importantly, with the team's confidence. Those words from her boss were more than just a compliment. They were confirmation that she had progressed, that her mistakes had not defined her, but rather helped her become someone better, more prepared, and more determined. As the week progressed, the respectful gestures continued. During shifts, her co-workers began to treat Lena with more respect, asking her opinion on complex cases and showing themselves open to your leadership. No longer an inexperienced young woman trying to prove her worth, but a respected professional, someone who had shown himself capable of dealing with the greatest pressures, not only with technical competence, but with a clear and confident vision of his role. What Lena felt most, however, was that the respect came not just from her technical skills, but from the way she handled under pressure, how she had remained calm in a moment of crisis. She had not only demonstrated her medical ability, but she had also shown that it was possible to remain steadfast and humanized in critical moments. The fact that her team realized that she not only mastered the technique, but also had the ability to be a calm and focused leader, was one of the greatest recognitions she could have received. But more important than the immediate respect of colleagues was the internal change that this provoked in her. Lena felt more confident, more secure in her decisions. She knew the recognition was valid, but the deepest thing was knowing that she now believed in herself. Before, she only did what she thought others expected of her. Now, she was doing what she believed was best for her patients and for her own development as a professional. The recognition from her colleagues was the key that finally unlocked the door to a new chapter in her life, where she no longer needed to prove anything to no one. Lena knew there was still a lot to learn and many challenges ahead, but now she was prepared to face them with the confidence of someone who had already gone through the difficulties and overcome the barriers. The respect of his colleagues was not just about technique, but about the recognition of his personal growth. She had conquered a new space, a space she knew she could shape with her own hands. Have you ever had a moment where you were finally recognized for your work and effort? Lena's journey is just beginning, and she still has a lot to learn. If you're inspired and want to see how far she can go, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Her path has been far from easy, but most importantly, she now knows she's ready to face any challenge. Don't miss the next chapters of this story of overcoming and achievement. After days of intense work, a frantic pace of shifts, meetings, and procedures, Lena wasn't prepared for what would happen on a seemingly ordinary morning at the hospital. The atmosphere was hectic, as usual, but she felt a different calm inside. Respect from colleagues and the growing confidence in her abilities had made Lena feel stronger, more capable. But there was something missing, something she hadn't even known she'd been searching for until that moment. The surgery she had performed, which had elevated her in the eyes of the staff, was not only bringing recognition within the hospital environment. Something else was going on. It was an internal feeling, like a lit flame that burned even brighter in her heart. Lena had begun to feel a true transformation, not only in the way others saw her, but also in the way she saw and felt about herself. She knew that the true proof of her evolution would not come from the words of others, but from an unexpected gesture. It was at the end of a particularly tiring shift that Lena saw well. The nurse responsible for her most recent patient's recovery approached her in the hallway. Anna was someone Lena had noticed but hadn't yet had much personal contact with. She knew Anna had always been respected by the staff for her competence and dedication. But what surprised her in that moment wasn't just the gesture, but the tone of her voice and the look of respect that the nurse told him. "Hello, Chief of Surgery," Anna said, with a sincere smile and a bow that Lena never imagined she would receive from someone on the team. It was a simple greeting, but at the same time, it was loaded with meaning. In that moment, Lena felt a wave of emotion that ran through her like an electric current. It wasn't just a nurse greeting a fellow nurse. It was someone who was recognizing in Lena not only her medical talent, but her journey, her internal transformation. Anna wasn't just treating Lena like a colleague, but like a leader. For someone like Lena, who had struggled to earn her trust and prove her worth, those words were a symbolic landmark. For the first time, Lena realized that the change in her life and career came not only from the technical respect she had earned, but from genuine recognition of your leadership, of her ability to be a professional who was ahead of their time and their own limitations. Anna's gaze, which had always been observant and silent, was now one of silent admiration, but profound. The words she spoke were not just a formality. For Lena, they were the symbol of his victory. She was no longer the young woman who needed to prove her worth to others, but rather a woman capable of leading with courage and competence. It was as if the world around her, the one that had previously viewed her with suspicion, was now finally recognizing the strength she carried within herself. Lena felt a wave of gratitude for the nurse. She knew this moment wouldn't change her trajectory overnight, but genuine respect from a colleague who recognized in her something beyond technique was an important milestone. More than a title or a role, it was the recognition of a path traveled with courage, and that simple gesture made her feel that, finally, she was in the place where it should be. Anna, noticing Lena's reaction, smiled warmly. She understood the depth of the moment and continued, "If you need anything, I'm here, Chief." The nurse didn't quickly walk away. Instead, she lingered for a moment, exchanging a knowing look with Lena, as if she knew the words weren't just a greeting, but a sign of deep respect for everything Lena had been through to get there. Lena watched Anna walk away, and for a moment, she stood in the hallway, reflecting on what had just happened. Chief of Surgery. The words still echoed in her mind, and she repeated them in her mind, as if trying to absorb the weight of the title. For her, at that moment, it wasn't about the position or the title she held, but about the feeling of belonging, to finally be recognized not just as someone who was going through hardships, but as a leader in your profession. What Lena didn't know was that, at that moment, she had given the final step to really believe in your own leadership. The respect she sought and felt she needed to earn outside of herself was already being recognized. But the most important thing was that, for the first time, she felt this recognition in her heart. She knew that Anna's words were more than just a greeting. They were a silent testimony to his ability and his transformation as a professional. Over the next few days, Lena felt something inside her change, not just because of the successful surgery she had undergone, but because of renewed sense of self-worth and leadership. She was no longer the surgeon who had to constantly fight to prove her worth. Now, she knew she had the authority and capacity of being a leader, respected and admired not only for her technique, but for her journey, for her evolution. Meeting Anna was, without a doubt, the milestone that made Lena realize that she had not only overcome her own insecurities, but had also conquered a genuine and lasting respect from your peers. She knew that, at that moment, she had given the last step-toe become the professional she always dreamed of being, but more importantly, the person she always knew it could be. Have you ever experienced a moment where you were finally recognized, and that changed everything for you? Lena continues her journey, now with more confidence and respect than ever. If you were inspired by this story, like the video, and subscribe to the channel to follow every step of Lena's journey. What comes next may be even more surprising. After so much internal and external struggle, Lena was finally at a place where she could look at herself with a sense of true pride. She had already picked herself up, faced her fears, and proven herself to her team. But something was still missing. Something that had always been at the center of her journey, that had always been there, even when she felt distant from it. The approval of your family. Lena knew the struggle wouldn't be easy. Her parents, always so demanding, were still far from understanding the true value of her journey. For them, Lena's success was never just about what she achieved, but about how she positioned herself in the world, how she overcame obstacles and became a winner in their eyes. But what she realized, throughout her journey, was that the true victory was no longer in pleasing them, but in please yourself. The moment of reflection arrived when Lena was invited to a family dinner, a rare occurrence after everything that had happened. The silence at the table, at first, was heavy, almost palpable. Lena knew the last few months had been difficult for everyone, but she also knew that that night could be the turning point for her and her relationship with her parents. As she watched her parents, who were older and with eyes full of expectations yet to be fulfilled, Lena felt a sense of solidarity with them, an understanding that they were all trying to find a way to connect, to understand each other. But in that moment, Lena also knew that she no longer needed scared to death of what they thought. She had rebuilt herself, not based on what others wanted from her, but based on what she had conquered by herself. That's when she spoke. Lena stood up and, in a firm, calm voice, said, "I know you always expected the best from me, and I know I was often frustrated that I couldn't live up to those expectations. But today, looking at what I've accomplished, and more importantly, who I've become, I can finally say that I'm at peace with myself, not because of what others expect, but because of what I know I'm capable of doing." Lena paused, feeling the weight of the words on her lips, but also the relief of free yourself from the need for external approval. Her parents looked at her in silence, their faces revealing a mixture of surprise and pride. The silence of the room seemed to be the answer she had always hoped for. It was the silence of those who I finally understood. It was Lena's mother who broke the silence first. With moist eyes, she said, almost in a whisper, "I just wanted you to be happy, daughter. And I see that now, more than ever. You are. We are proud of you." And in that moment, Lena knew she no longer needed to worry about what her family thought of her. She had proven herself, not in grand gestures, but in daily commitment to following your own path. The love she so longed for from her parents, she now knew she already had, because they saw in her someone who she had the courage to be true to herself, who didn't need to be perfect to be loved. Over time, Lena's relationship with her family strengthened, but not by the incessant search for approval, but by mutual acceptance and respect that now existed between them. Lena knew her story was just beginning. Her career, her life, now had the meaning she had always wanted, not to be the best for others, but to be the best version of herself. Have you ever been on a journey where you had to find your own path, even without the approval of others? What have you learned from following your heart? If you were moved by Lena's story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to follow more stories of overcoming and transformation. Sometimes the greatest recognition comes from ourselves, and that's all we need to keep moving forward. Don't miss the next chapters of this journey. We're in this together.